Hey, welcome to Real Talk, where I give real answers to real questions from real worship leaders. If you are a real worship leader with a real question and you want a real answer, head right here and submit your question for a future episode. Here's the question of the week. Hey, Spencer. I've been playing guitar and singing in praise bands for 15 years now, and I have always had my music and lyrics on a stand. It has been a crutch that I cannot break. I've been working on memorizing my songs, but when I get on stage on Sunday morning, I feel so anxious about forgetting the words or chords of the songs that I can't overcome looking at my stand. Any advice to help me overcome this crutch would be appreciated. So how do you get rid of your music stand and start memorizing your music when you lead worship? And first of all, let me say that I think I've been harsh on using a music stand in the past. And over the past year or two, I've sort of softened my view on using a music stand whenever you're leading worship. And when I say that, I mean, I still believe that it's better to have your music memorized and lyrics memorized for several reasons. One of those being because it forces you to actually learn the song instead of just reading off a piece of paper. Number two, when you learn the song that well that it's memorized, it frees you up to actually focus on other things other than just, I have to read this piece of paper while I'm leading. And I know that some people would be like, well, that actually frees me up because then I don't have to memorize that stuff. But I'm saying, if you make the leap, I think there's a spectrum here where it's like I rely solely on my music stand, and then it's like I don't know the song well enough to really play it without the music stand, so I have to be here and I have to be locked in. When I say be here, I mean like I'm like super focused now on the music. But there's a point that you get to where you know your music so well that you aren't thinking about the music at all, which is what's happening over here. Maybe your music stand helps you think about the music and the lyrics a little bit less because you have that cheat sheet down there. And then in the middle is I can only focus on the music because I'm so focused on having it memorized, which I don't even think is really memorized at that point, at least not fully memorized, because you're thinking about it. We want to get to the place where it's muscle memory. That way we don't even have to focus on the musical side of leading worship while we're leading worship. And that's the place that I've been at for the past, I don't know how long I've been leading worship without a music stand. But that's the place that I'm at. But I understand that not everybody is there. And so I think a lot of people, when it comes to memorizing your music, getting rid of the music stand, are afraid to be stuck in that middle spot, and they don't realize that you can get to that other spot where when I get up on stage, and I'm not saying this because like, oh, I'm so amazing, I'm just saying you get to the spot eventually where you start to feel the music almost, and I'm not even thinking, oh, here comes an A chord, here comes a B minor chord, here comes a G chord, whatever. I'm at the place where I feel that, and my fingers just do what they do because it's almost muscle memory and it comes out naturally, although I don't think it's just muscle memory. It's not like I learned the song once and then my fingers just go to do it. I'm like more so feeling the song. I hope that makes sense. And so all that to say, I've softened my view a little bit on music stands whenever you're leading worship. I don't think that it is the worst thing in the world. And I don't know if I ever really thought it was the worst thing in the world. I was just like, I think that you must do this, but I don't know if you necessarily must do this. So when I'm talking to you, Mike, first of all, just realize you can lead worship with a music stand. It's not the end of the world. But I think that you recognize that there are benefits to memorizing your music. And so I'm glad that you recognize that. I think it is helpful for you, though, to recognize that there's this middle period, and you might even have to sit in that middle period where it's like, okay, I have to hyper-focus on the musical side of things so that you get used to that, and then you move on to what I was talking about, where you don't have to focus on the music at all because it's just all up here and it comes out naturally. And so maybe that's helpful for you to realize that it feels nerve-wracking when you're in that middle period, but you can only get to the latter part where it comes out naturally if you go through that middle part. And I think, and I mean, it's been so long ago since I've led worship with a music stand. I mean, I'll do it from time to time, like at a funeral or something, if I have to learn songs real quick. But on a typical Sunday morning, I haven't led worship with a music stand in a really long time. But I'm sure at the beginning, I felt that, where it was like, I'm nervous that I'm going to play the wrong note, so I'm hyper-focused. Get through that middle section, and you will come out to the other side where you feel the music instead of just having it memorized, so to speak. Now, let's talk about some practical things you can do to memorize your music in a way that is most effective. And I'll link 2 videos that I made a while ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago. I made these videos, but I still think that they're really helpful about how to memorize your chords and how to memorize your lyrics. There's 2 different videos, but I'll break down briefly in this video how to go about it. And I think the first thing that you need to do if you want to memorize your music is it's probably helpful to cut down on your worship song repertoire. I made a video about how I only sing 30 songs at my church. I'll link that down in the description below as well. Now, I don't just do that so that I can memorize the songs, but if you have like 125 songs in your worship song repertoire, which is not that crazy for churches to have. I know a lot of churches, some churches are like, I counted up all the songs that we do and we can pick from a list of over 200 songs. I probably can't memorize 200 songs. That's a whole lot of songs to memorize. And so just start at the root here. If you're worried about memorizing your music, maybe you pick from too many songs. And when it comes to a Sunday morning, you're playing like 5 different songs every Sunday morning for 2 months in a row or something. And that's what, 40 songs or something? That's a lot of songs to memorize. So shrink your worship song repertoire. Or if you're not in charge, no, you did say that you're the leader of the worship team. But for people who aren't in charge, if you want to memorize your music, but you're not in charge of picking songs, and it's not like you can be like, I'm going to cut down the worship song repertoire, then just pick maybe 20 songs where you're like, when we play these songs, I'm going to have them memorized. So that's the first thing. The second thing is let's talk about how to actually memorize the song. And what's been most helpful for me is twofold. We'll talk about chords first, and then we'll talk about lyrics. So when it comes to chords, the key point in memorizing your music is to recognize that chords are most likely a pattern. They're a progression. And so I think whenever we first start thinking about memorizing music, memorizing the chords for a song, we think, okay, there are like 68 chords in this song, and I've got to memorize each one. And in the verse, it's like G, C. What comes next? D. Okay, and then it's E minor. All right, now I'm on to the second line, and it's like G, C. What comes next? D, E minor. Do you see the problem here yet? And then you get to the third line, and it's like, what is that next chord? Oh, it's a G, and then it's a C, and then it's a D and an E minor. Do you see how, and this is especially true in modern worship songs, and I mean, even like hymns, I guess, because hymns are just repeating verses over and over again. And my point is, in those verses, in each section of the song, verse, chorus, bridge, usually there's a chord progression that you're following, and it's called a progression because we aren't just picking random chords throughout the entire verse or chorus or whatever. It's like the chord progression for the verse is G, C, D, E minor, G, C, D, E minor, G, C, D, E minor, G, C, D, E minor. I mean, pull up a chord chart and look at it, and you'll see for the most part, it follows the same 4 chords or whatever chords over and over again. And so when it comes to memorizing your music, you don't have to memorize each individual chord. You just have to memorize the chord progression for the verse. And so instead of saying, okay, this verse is G, C, D, E minor, 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 G, C, D, E minor over and over again, you just say, no, I know that the chord progression for verse number 1 is G, C, D, E minor. And that's all you have to memorize. And then you get to the chorus, and it's like, okay, then it switches to C, G, D, E minor. And that's all you have to memorize. And I understand that some songs are a bit more complicated than that, but that's where it starts. You recognize what is the chord progression for each part of the song, and instead of memorizing 67 chords or whatever it is, you then instead memorize maybe 3 or 4 chord progressions throughout the song, and then boom, you've got it memorized and you're good to go. So that's the first thing when it comes to chords, but the second thing is that you will get to a point where you start to feel the chords. Ultimately, if you want to memorize how to play a song, for me, it has not been to memorize even just the chord progression. I think that's sort of the natural progression, to use the word again, progression, is we go from memorizing all the individual chords to memorizing just chord progressions, but you eventually want to get to that point where I was talking about over here, back at the beginning of this video, where you actually feel the songs. And I'm not even sure what the best way to explain that is, but when I'm playing a song on Sunday, I'm not even thinking of the chords. I'm not like, here comes a D, here comes a B minor, here comes a G, here comes an A. It's something that you feel. You feel it in the melody. You know what chords support the melody of the song, and then that allows you to not even think of the chords. Once again, I'm not 100% sure how to describe the feel of something without going more in depth than what I can in this video, but just understand you're aiming for that feeling of this chord comes next, this chord, and you can hear it in your head. It's almost like I see it in my mind's eye before I get to that chord, but it's not even like, okay, I'm seeing a D here and a B minor here and a G here. It's like I almost just see the shape of the music, which I know sounds crazy, but that's the best way I can explain it. So do that if you want to memorize your chords. First of all, memorize chord progressions, and it'll significantly tamp down on the amount of things that you have to memorize. And then number two, start to try to get to that place where you feel it. And that's only something that you're going to get to over time as you memorize more and more songs. Now let's quickly talk about lyrics here and how to memorize those. Those are a little bit more difficult, because you can't just memorize a progression. But there are certain patterns in the lyrics that I find helpful. For instance, if you have to memorize a chorus, once again, we could look at, I need to memorize 250 different words in this song, or you can realize, no, I just need to memorize the chorus once, but then that chorus is sung 3 times throughout the song, so that shrinks from 3 choruses. We realize they're all the same, shrinks it down to 1 chorus, and now I only have to memorize 1 section instead of 3 sections. And the same is true for a bridge. You only have to memorize that once, and then you sing that over and over again, and over and over and over and over and over again, if you sing a bridge 11 times like some people do. So choruses and bridges, you only have to memorize those once. The verses are where it gets a little bit more difficult, and you actually have to put in the work to memorize those. What I've found helpful for me in memorizing the verses is that I like to think through the actual meaning of the lyrics. I'm not just trying to memorize the individual words, but I'm thinking, what does this song actually mean? And you'll find, at least in well-written songs, that there is a logical flow to the lyrics. And we can use the song A Mighty Fortress as an example here. Think of the lyrics in verse 1. A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. Our helper he amidst the flood of mortal ills prevailing. But still our ancient foe doth seek to work us woe. His craft and power are great, and armed with cruel hate, on earth is not his equal. So that's the first verse. You've got to memorize that. And then when we get to verse 2, I'm thinking, okay, we just sang about how strong the devil is in the world. Now it's about how I can't fight him on my own. I don't have enough strength. So we sing, did we in our own strength confide, our striving would be losing. We're not the right man on our side, the man of God's own choosing. And then in verse number 2, we ask, remember, this is all logical, who is the right man? Doth ask who that may be. Christ Jesus, it is he. Lord Sabaoth, his name. From age to age the same, and he must win the battle. And so on and so forth. So look for the logical progression in the lyrics, and as you understand the actual meaning of what the lyrics are saying, I think it'll actually help you lead the song better, but it'll also help you memorize those lyrics better. Like I said, if you need more help with memorizing your music, I'll link 2 videos about that down in the description below. But if you just want to improve your worship leading in general, then also check out down in the description below 5 tips to instantly improve your worship leading. It's a free audio training that I put together. They're 5 simple tips that I share with you that aren't hard to do. You just have to make the conscious effort to do them and apply them this Sunday. You can apply them this Sunday, and they will instantly improve your worship leading. So check that out down in the description below. Other than that, until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.